Hi, this is going to be Unit 2 Test Review, Part 1, where I'm going to go over numbers 1 through 25. So, number 1, what did the Continental Congress create for our first government? Well, this is during the American Revolution. They create the very first form of government that doesn't work. It's called the Articles of Confederation. That's our very first government of the United States. Number 2, what did the smaller states demand before accepting the Articles of Confederation? Well, the smaller states were very afraid of the bigger states becoming even bigger. So they demanded that the larger states limit themselves by giving up their claims to Western lands. This ensured that the smaller states wouldn't become completely overruled by huge states. Number 3, what was the Northwest Ordinance? Well, the Northwest Ordinance was a plan for the orderly growth of the United States. Oops, I can't spell today. Because this was like the main success of the Articles. Because the Northwest Ordinance sets it up to describe this pattern of how are states going to apply to become a part of the United States. What will they need to do to be admitted into the Union? Okay, so the Northwest Ordinance is a plan for orderly growth. Number 4, who had the most power under the Articles of Confederation? Well, that is the states. The state governments kept tons of power, which really is what number 5 is then asking about. What powers did the national government lack under the Articles of Confederation? They lacked the two most important powers. The states got these powers. They lacked the power to enforce national laws and the power to levy taxes, which means to give taxes. And so the national government was very weak under the Articles of Confederation. That was done on purpose. Number 6, what opened Kentucky to settlement? Well, Daniel Boone had created something called the Wilderness Road, which created a path that settlers could go across the Appalachian Mountains. Number 7, list 3 things that led to the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Remember, the Constitutional Convention was supposed to be just a fix of the Articles of Confederation. They weren't supposed to be writing the Constitution. So one thing that led to that, why did it make it number 8? What did I do? So one thing that led to that, I'm going to say answer A. There was a need to promote trade between the states. The states weren't working very well together. They were arguing all of the time. Okay. And then B, there was an increasing number of debtors in our country, people who owed lots of money. The government was getting involved in creating ways for these people to pay back their debt. They needed to fix that. Okay. And then Shays' Rebellion had just happened, and people were very worried about what's going to happen if rebellions continue in our country. Okay, speaking of Shays' Rebellion, number 8 asks us to list 3 similarities between Shays' Rebellion and the American Revolution. Well, one is that taxes played a major role in both rebellions. In both of those rebellions, people were very upset about the high taxes that they were being asked to pay. Another reason is that there was this perceived injustice, that people felt like the government was not being fair, and that led to armed conflict, that people were then willing to fight against the government because they thought it was so unfair. And then both of them were illegal uprisings. What they were doing was not legal at the time. You cannot just fight against the government. That was true in the American Revolution, and that was true in Shays' Rebellion. Okay, however, in the American Revolution, the people won, and so we continue to think of the American Revolution as being the right thing to do, whereas in Shays' Rebellion, they lost, and so people often think of that as being the wrong thing to do. However, it was true about both. Why did anti-federalists oppose the Constitution? They believed that it gave too much power to the national government. There was this real fear by anti-federalists of tyranny. They had just experienced tyranny under the British, and they didn't want to have a national government that was going to be too strong. Who were some of those really famous anti-federalists? George Mason and Patrick Henry were two who had fought strongly in the American Revolution against the British. They don't want to create a new government then to replace that has too much power. Why did the Federalists support the Constitution? Well, they supported it because they believed that a strong national government was necessary. Okay, they thought that they didn't have another choice, that the Articles of Confederation was too weak, and that just didn't work for our country. So who were some of those important Federalists? James Madison, who had written the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton, who had argued strongly for the Constitution, and John Jay, who ends up being the first chief of the Supreme Court. Okay, so why do we add the Bill of Rights to the Constitution then? Well, we have a few reasons. One reason that the Bill of Rights gets added, is that many states refuse to ratify without a Bill of Rights. They said we need to be protected. Okay. Another reason why we add the Bill of Rights is because we wanted to protect the rights of the people, right? That people had individual freedoms, individual rights. They wanted to ensure that the government was going to protect those things. And then many people believed that the national government needed to be limited, and that a Bill of Rights would do that a Bill of Rights would protect the people from a national government that could just take unlimited power. Okay. At the Constitutional Convention, they make a couple of important compromises. One of them is called the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise is all about creating a method of determining state representation, how many representatives each state was going to get in Congress. And it created a two-house legislature. So the Great Compromise really creates the system that we then have in our legislature, where we have a Senate and a House of Representatives. Okay, number 15, what problem did the 3/5 Compromise solve? While they were arguing about how to count slaves for taxation and representation. And they decided to count 3/5 of the total number of slaves. Number 16, why did Americans fear a strong national government? Well, they had experienced a strong national government under the British, and that had led to tyranny. Tyranny. Excuse me. How many states were required in order to ratify the Constitution? There had to be 9 out of 13 states to ratify. How does the Constitution balance federal and state power? Which amendment guarantees this? It balances federal and state power through a concept called federalism, that there's going to be a division of power, dividing powers between the state and national government. And this is guaranteed in the 10th Amendment of the United States Bill of Rights. All right. And then the last few questions are about the 7 principles of the Constitution. You need to be able to define each and match their definition for the test. So federalism means that some powers belong to the federal government, and some powers belong to the state governments. Okay, that they share powers. Checks and balances means that each branch of government has some ability, not unlimited ability, but just some ability to limit the other 2 branches. Separation of powers means that we are going to divide the government into those three branches. Popular sovereignty, it means a government by the people. The people have the power of the government. And then republicanism means that citizens elect representatives to make laws for us so that we don't have to have day-to-day participation in our government. Individual rights are protected by the Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights. And then limited government means all citizens, even if you are an elected and powerful leader, must obey the law. Doesn't matter who you are. All right, make sure that you memorize those definitions. You have to match them up on the test. Come back later for part 2.